Okay, everybody, I want to thank Easton Padden for getting on our weekly call. Easton is with FFL Coastal, which is Athena's group, and FFL Mile High, which is Zach T's group. And he's been with us about 3 months. Last month in May, he issue paid $15,000, and 3 weeks into June, he is already at $28,000. And so he's definitely going to clear 30 or more this month, and he runs all final expense. So, Easton, thank you so much for getting on our call. Appreciate you taking the time to help us out. If you'd start by giving us a little bit of background on what you used to do, how you found Family First Life, and then go into what you're doing that's helping you achieve these great issue paid numbers.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much for thinking of me, Paige, and having me on. It's still weird being asked to get on any calls because I still feel like I'm so brand new. So thanks for thinking of me. It's very flattering. So I'll just kind of start from the top. I was born and raised in Montana. Kind of grew up around farming and ranching. Pretty much my whole life. Had a number of different types of jobs, landscaping, roofing, and then the farming and ranching part. And once I got out of school, I ended up finding Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is where I started kind of my first, corporate suit and tie job. Did that for just about 3 years, and did like account management and some business management at Enterprise. And I found Family First Life actually through Josh Rose. Just saw an ad on ZipRecruiter, I believe, actually, and it talked about, be your own boss, make $100 to $400 a year, depending on how much you want to work kind of deal. So I checked it out. My second year at Enterprise is when I found it, and it took me a little bit over a year to leave my current job and kind of come fully on board because, like a lot of people, it was kind of nerve-wracking leaving your comfortable, office job to go into work for yourself. So that's kind of how I ended up coming on board was through Josh Rose and the dripping that everybody talks about. It does work.
Absolutely. Okay, well, tell us about how it was when you first got started, and then what you changed or tweaked to do the 15K in May, and now what you're doing here in June, because whatever you're doing is definitely working based on your numbers alone.
Well, thanks a bunch, Paige. And I think, from the beginning, everyone talks about the phones and how important they are. So I had definitely kind of understood that from, day one, that it's important to be on your dial days. It's important to be on the phone until you have your appointment set. So I knew that if I just stayed on the phone all day and called over and over and over and over again, then eventually I'd have my appointment set so I could, start practicing when I was actually getting into the house. I would say the biggest change for me in the last 4 to 6 weeks, as far as my phone stuff goes, is my tie downs. I would have quite a few days where, I'd be booking 8 to 11 appointments a day, and I would get like 1 or 2 sits. So I would call Athena, Zach, and Josh and, figure out, hey, I set all these appointments and I'm not getting to see anybody. What should I do? And they said, well, how are you tying them down? And, it turns out that I wasn't doing a very good job tying my appointments down. So that is the biggest thing on the phone that I definitely changed, was spending more time at the end. You'll hear Grayson talk about his tie downs as well. That's almost a little bit longer than his actual script. So I started moving to Athena actually talked to me about the calendar. Like, hey, can you grab that important calendar where you write all of your appointments in and grab a pen and jot my name down? I'll be there between 9 and 10 o'clock. And so I started doing that, and then the house, mailbox, the curb, where's the numbers on the place? Is it an apartment? Is it easy to find? And just like digging in, asking questions, just to book the appointments. So I started getting more sits, which, as everyone knows, more sits, more practice, more sales is pretty much how that goes. So that was a humongous change that I made on the phones that I noticed made a big difference in the quality and quantity of sits I was getting. And then after getting my appointments all booked, I knew that I was going to be terrible in the house when I started. So, in my mind, I was like, well, everyone says to run 30 a week, but I'm going to be really, really terrible. So I'm going to try to set 40 plus if I can. And I don't get to that number every single week, but I think I've probably had 6 or 7 weeks where I've ran 40 or more appointments a week. And since I'm doing final expense, I'm able to do every hour on the hour and run 10 to 12 appointments on my run days. So that's been, something that I knew, like I said, I was going to be bad, in the house. So I wanted to give myself the best chance to succeed as I could. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you mentioned final expense. So are you running all final expense?
Yep. I'm running 100% final expense right now. I am trying to get a little bit better of a lead mix, but I could get the most of them for the cheapest price. So that, starting up, it seemed like that made the most sense to me. Like I said, they're so cheap to get, and you can get them in 48 hours. You can have these 25, 50, 75 lead orders come in, in just a couple of days and really get out there and get the experience of getting in all the houses and seeing all the different types of conversations you're going to have and overcoming objections, just more practice, more volume. So Facebook was my go-to. That's still what I'm running 100% on. I was able to lock out a couple of mortgage protection counties in other states, so I started doing that. So I'll start getting to run a little bit more mortgage here in the next couple of weeks. But, to start, it was all 100% final expense.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. And you make a really good point that with the final expense, they tend to be faster appointments. You do have a lot of no-shows, so I can definitely understand why you tweaked your tie down, which sounds great, by the way. And, one thing I've started doing, Easton, only one I heard you not mention, I've started asking them, should I park on the street or the driveway? It's a good way for them to, continue to visualize me coming to their house. So that's the only one I didn't hear you mention. I was jotting them down real quick. That's great. So now all final expense, you are branching into mortgage. So let's go into the home. What are you doing in the home? You mentioned being terrible at first because you're new at this, and more practice, is what you're aiming for. And with more practice, you get more sales. So tell us about your in-home.
So biggest adjustment I've made in the house is spending more time that first 10 minutes, in the house, sitting down with them and kind of digging into that why portion more. And you hear everybody talk about it, how important it is to get the why out. And Zach and Grayson had done a training where they talked about setting a little 10-minute timer, and I just took that literally. I kind of thought that that's what they meant, so I just started getting my phone out and setting a 10-minute timer, and I wouldn't let myself move through the appointment any farther until that 10-minute span had been up. And so I did that for probably 3 or 4 consecutive run days. So, pretty much a full week of, 35 to 40 appointments where I forced myself to have that 10-minute timer on physically. And then when my alarm went off, I knew I could, turn it off and kind of start moving through the appointment, because by then I would normally have a pretty good why from the client. So that was...
That's amazing.
Go ahead.
So if you'll tell me, what kind of questions did you ask? What did you start to get them going on getting their why out of them?
So just figuring out why I was there. Wetmore does some really good training on, hey, did you just have someone that passed away recently that you know? Did they have insurance? Did they not have insurance? Are you worried about someone specifically? It's pretty common knowledge that insurance is for someone else. It's not for them. It's for someone they care about. So I wanted to find out if that was one child, if it was 2, was it for their spouse only? There's always got to be at least one specific person, if not multiple, that it seems like will come out if you start, trying to dig into who that person is. And then once I have who that person is, I try to find out what their situation would exactly look like if they didn't have this set up. So I would say a lot of our clientele doesn't have, $10, $15, $20,000 laying around, to get that stuff kind of paid for. So just asking them, hey, what does it look like if they have to come up with $10,000? Are they going to be okay? And 99% of the time, they wouldn't be. Every once in a while, you run into someone who, says, oh, yep, they're doing pretty well. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you don't see a lot of that with the clients that we sit with. So getting that person's name and, specifically understanding what's going to happen if they don't have it.
And has it ever gotten awkward during the 10 minutes?
Yes. Yeah, because I'll just kind of sit there and wait, especially the first time I did it, because I was like, wow, I promised myself I would take 10 minutes to do this. And then the alarm hadn't gone off yet. And it just wouldn't go off and wouldn't go off. So I would just kind of go back and okay, so you said your daughter, her name is Stephanie. Where does she live again? Okay, perfect. And you said she would be in bad shape. Okay. And I would sometimes I would have to kind of get the same answer out of them, more than once,
right?
Just so that I knew it was crystal clear, because then it does give them a chance to really, really think about it. But yeah, definitely, we had some awkward silence moments in there where I didn't really know what to say next. And so I would just kind of go back to what they had said in the beginning, be like, okay, just so I'm going to be clear, this is for Stephanie. She's 35, one kid, she's married, and their family would be in a tough spot. Okay, perfect. And then I would start, okay, well, here's what we're going to do today, and then kind of go through the financial inventory sheet with them.
Okay, great. Well, and you know what? The reason I asked that question is because I'm sure anybody listening to this will be thinking, wow, I don't know if I could talk about that for 10 minutes. But it is a critical part of this. This is not a rational sale. It is definitely an emotional sale. And if you aren't pulling out the why, if you're leaving more homes without an application done than you are, with an application done, it might be the best advice I think I could give is exactly what you just said, Easton. Slow down and work on that why. And if you need to get yourself in the habit, literally set a timer. I'm assuming after 4 days of running like that, this has become just the way you do your appointments now. You don't have to set the timer. Would that be right?
Yeah, correct. Yep, that's right on. And sometimes now, I can get it out in 8 minutes or it's 12 minutes. But, you try not to let it go. If you get them talking too much about the family, it could be 30 minutes in before you've, set up structure, and then things kind of get lost. So
right.
12 minutes is probably a little bit long, but yeah, that 8 to 10 minute mark seems to be a pretty good amount to be able to dig in and really get a good answer of them why you're there.
Okay, good. I like that. Okay, and what else have you been doing in the home?
So before I show numbers, I always rehash why I'm there to begin with too. So once I kind of figure out where we're going to place them, then I'll say, okay, so you based on what you told me, we're going to be looking at, 20, 15, and 10. And then we'll kind of, pick the one that's going to make the most financial sense for you. And this is specifically to protect, your daughter. And then I kind of run them back through what we're looking at again and why I'm there, just to give them one little, one more opportunity to kind of rehash and think about, oh yeah, this is for my daughter, this is for my son or my spouse. So I always ask one more time before I pull out numbers, and that seems to be actually helping me quite a bit too.
Okay, like that. And what if they have existing policies?
So I always try to get that out in the beginning, and Zach T did a really good training on it where, we have the client suitability worksheet. So I'm like, if they ask, hey, well, why do you need that? Or I don't know where it is. It's like, well, hey, it's on the suitability sheet. It's going to help me place you, because you might have enough coverage and not even need this, And so when they find out, hey, I might not have to spend more money if I go get my policy, or he has to have it for suitability, usually you can get it out. I just try to, hey, it's going to save you a little bit. It could save you money, and it could definitely save us about 20 minutes. If you can get that out, I can just take a quick look at it to make sure that, you have exactly what you think you have. And that's like a good little spot to find out if they're trusting you yet. And if not, do you need to go back and kind of reintroduce yourself and talk about what you do, or, if you need to backtrack a little bit, you can at that point. But that's a good way to find out if they're kind of on board with why you're there.
Okay. And at what point are you asking for the policy?
Probably right after we start the suitability worksheet, because I'll talk to them like, hey, this is the suitability that we're going to go through. And it talks about at the bottom, hey, if you have any existing life insurance, every appointment is a little bit different. So sometimes I can get it out. If they say, oh, I already have this taken care of, I'm like, oh, awesome. We'll just go get it from me, and we'll kind of start going through the suitability worksheet together. So sometimes I can get it before we go through it, and then sometimes when we get to that portion where it asks if they have anything that acts like life insurance, we can get it out then too. It just depends on how the beginning of the appointment is set up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And what if they seem reluctant to go get it?
I always try to go back into the suitability worksheet. Like, hey, I have to have this for suitability. If they're like, oh, my daughter has a policy, you can have them get their bank statements out. Just say, hey, we just need to kind of figure out what you already have so that I can make sure that we're helping you, in the best way that we can help you. I just make it sound like it's a necessity and it's very, very important, which it is. You definitely want to know what they already have in place, because I'm sure you've heard people talk about 90% of the time people don't have exactly what they think, or they think they have way more than they do. So, yeah, it's really important for both of you to have them get that out.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Let's go on to what you do after the appointment. Now, if you're in the appointment, I'm assuming with all these appointments you've been running, you run enough that you don't actually need to call to figure out which company to place them with, unless you run across something strange or odd. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yep. Most of the time I have once we get to the health portion, like, I'm getting a pretty good idea of where we're going to go. Just like with everyone, you might as well try them with Americo because they're the best you can do. And they're our preferred, provider. So we try to do as much Americo as we can. But yeah, I'm getting a lot better at knowing the products. So that's been helpful as well by running so much.
Okay. Yep. And, the more you run, the more quickly you get through that learning curve. Now, if you do hit something that you're not sure, some medical situation that you haven't seen before, or what do you do then?
I just call Athena, Josh, or Zach. They're pretty much been, the three people that I've called in-home since shortly after I started. Josh and Athena, I called probably 50 times a day my first couple of weeks. And then once I met Zach and found out he was coming to Colorado, he's been a great mentor for me, and, helping me kind of learn the different products and where to go. But, yeah, I was calling my uplines and, Athena like crazy when I was first started because I didn't have any clue what I was doing. Right.
Okay. Great. And that's exactly what how the system works. That's how people learn. And clearly with it's that and running enough appointments that, the more you talk to them and you see the similar situations, it starts to stick in your brain and you've got it. So great. And then what do you do after the appointment, whether you if you didn't sell the policy, if you didn't do an application?
So whether I do or don't sell them, I try to kind of call, especially if I don't sell them, I always call and say, hey, this is what, just happened. This is what they said, and I was kind of stuck. What would you have said to kind of navigate around that? And I like to bring a notepad in my car with me to kind of make notes, which I didn't do when I first started, which I really wish I would have done from day one. But I was probably like 3 weeks in when I started bringing a notebook to like make notes of when I would call and ask for help. I would write down, okay, they asked me this. This is what, Zach, Josh, and Athena told me to say after. And so I started tracking a little bit more of, the help that they were willing to give to try to help my learning curve go up a little bit quicker.
Oh, that's smart. And writing it down, that always helps. It helps me stick in my brain. I know a lot of people are that way because it's a lot of information when you're getting started. Okay, that makes sense. And so you call multiple people to get, in case they have different perspectives?
Well, yeah, and it seems like everyone, the in-home is basically the same for everybody, but everyone does it a little bit different. And, with people as experienced that we have as this company that are willing to talk to you, I mean, you might as well call and get as many different opinions as you can, because maybe you'll find a little tweak that, Josh does that, and Zach does it this way, and Athena did it this way, and everyone has an answer for you, so you can get help from any different direction you want to go, which I think was super, super important for me when I started kind of turning the corner and getting a little bit better in the house, was just making sure that I wasn't shy about asking questions and asking for help.
Awesome. And did you ever feel like you were calling them too much?
Yes, I did. I was like, I'm going to probably be driving them nuts. But they were actually, glad that I was reaching out for help and wasn't trying to just kind of be on my own little island. Because if I was out, failing by myself and then not asking how to get better, that doesn't seem like that would benefit me. So I was like, well, they said I could call them, so I'm going to call their phone as much as I possibly can throughout the day. And that's something that I picked up on training calls too, is everyone's always, saying, hey, if you have questions or whatever, please reach out. And so I said, well, they told me I could, so I'm just going to keep calling them and calling them and calling them. So yes, it did feel like I was probably bothering them, but I didn't know what else to do, so I just did what they told me to do and called them.
And once you talked to them, you didn't feel like you were bothering them, right?
No, not at all. They were like, oh, hey, thanks for reaching out. If you have any other questions, please call me again.
Exactly.
So very, very willing to help.
Yep. And, I have a lot of agents myself who are like, oh, my gosh, I feel like I call you all the time. And I'm like, hey, that's what I'm here for. So I think, and I can remember the days of me calling. So I think we all feel that way, like, oh, my gosh, I've got to be wearing them out. But in truth, that's part of what makes Family First Life so incredibly different and better than anywhere I've ever been or any place I've ever heard of, is that you do have multiple people to reach out to. You can get the different perspectives, and it can help you tweak what works best for you. And it helps you learn and get through the learning curve faster, which is always the goal. So that's great. So let's say you've run a whole day of appointments and it's all done. Now what do you do?
So like when I'm driving home?
Yes.
So I always do like a follow-up call and talk about, hey, here's how the day went, here's what happened. I've had days where I went out in the field and went, 0 for 11 and 0 for 10 or 1 for 10, and I'm like, wow, I just, between getting up and driving around and doing these appointments, I must have missed something because, no one was there. I got a ton of no's. So I tried to always reach out and say, hey, here's what happened. Here's how my day went. Here's something that I want to work on, or what would you have done differently in your situation? And a lot of that, like I said, did start on the phone with my poor tie downs. But I would listen to trainings and call and update, all the people that were helping me out. I think specifically Josh, Athena, and Zach have kind of been the three people that I've talked to the most as far as getting that help. So that's who I would talk to at the end of the day.
And that's a great way to kind of wrap it all up mentally so you can be ready for the next day, whether it's another run day or your dial day.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And they, Athena was definitely a big help as far as like, hey, I just went 0 for 11, like, hey, I'm kind of having a down day, or, I can't wait to get out there again and, try this one more time. But I did hear enough on all the different trainings how all these really experienced guys were talking about, hey, I just, I issued 400 grand last year, but I went 1 for 10 today. And I'm like, well, if these guys have been doing it for that long and they have days like this, of course I'm going to have days like this when I'm new. So they would help me make that mental adjustment at the end of the day. Like, hey, don't forget, this happens to everybody. It's just part of the deal. You're going to have some run days that are tough. And just so staying mentally sound and having that encouragement from our leaders was huge for me when I was first getting rolling.
Yes, and that can be tough. It definitely can. And, if you're in your car on your way home and you've got it silent and you're just rehashing the day yourself in your own mind, it's so easy to be focused on the negatives of the day. And as you do that, you just sink further down. And it doesn't do anything to get you ready to go make the next day a different type of day. So I think calling is very important. And I've heard from Athena and others that you call all the time and that they love it and that they attribute a lot of your growth and success to the fact that you call so much, and you call different people, and you're just not only that, but you're listening to trainings in your call, and that you're a true student of the business. You're trying to absorb as much as you can, as quickly as you can, so that you reach 30,000, maybe even 40,000 issue paid a month. So it's definitely helping. And I know Athena specifically said to me one day after speaking with you that she'd just spoken with you. She knew that we had met, so she shared that you'd had a 0 for 8 day, and you still were upbeat. She goes, wow, I wish other agents were like that. So I think you can take that as a compliment, Easton. So
yeah,
anything specific? That is a compliment, especially from Athena, because she's Miss Positive herself. Anything that you're doing to help you stay upbeat, focused, positive, strong, mentally, physically, emotionally, because this business can be tough. So tell us what you're doing with stuff like that.
So I start my days pretty early. Every single morning I'm usually, somewhere between 4 and 4:45, I'm usually rolling out of bed, kind of getting stuff started. And I think that I don't like to be rushed in the mornings, and I have a very specific routine that I stick to. And I think that does help me, whether I'm prepping for a dial day or a run day. Being up early and allowing myself to, have my same structured morning schedule every single day is a big help for me. Because then I'm not, 7:15 and I need to be out the door by 7:30, and I haven't taken a shower, eaten, or whatever each person's morning looks like. So starting early is very important. And Sean, Mike, and John Wetmore said that broke people get up at 7. So I just kind of made it a rule of mine that I'd be up earlier than I, probably was at my last job, because that's what, all the successful people said to do. So I was just going to listen to them.
Makes sense. And what, if you don't mind sharing, what is your morning routine?
So I get up and I'll either, I usually put on a pot of coffee every single morning. And then about every other day, I try to go and get a little morning exercise just to kind of get a quick release. It helps me start my morning. I think it's a good stress reliever. It kind of takes your mind off of, if you're getting overwhelmed by, whatever part of the business you're going through at that time. Kind of helps you take your mind off of it for, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever that looks like for you. But that's every other day. I'm usually, I work out. Then I come back and, do the coffee thing and a little breakfast. And I have all my stuff prepared for my day, usually the night before. I do give myself enough time in the morning to, put together my bag, because I feel like if I do it the night before, I'll forget something. So I do my bag every morning. And then I just take off for my run day. And, when you get home, or, Zach's opening up an office in Parker area here in Colorado. So I drive up here, for our dial days together, that a couple of us get together and have our dial sessions. But yeah, every single morning is very early. Coffee is important.
I can appreciate that. And lastly, let me ask you, are you hiring already?
So I am just starting, the hiring process. And I'm so new at it that I do get a little bit overwhelmed. So I'm getting help from a lot of different people on, hiring strategy. Mike Killamit just had an outstanding seminar, about hiring that we did at our meeting last Thursday in Atlanta. So that was great. I took a ton of notes and learned a bunch there. And then, Zach, Athena, and John are kind of helping me get the ball rolling on my hiring. But yeah, I'm very bad at hiring. It's just like running. When you first start, it's harder and you have a lot to learn. But I am starting to hire right now.
Awesome. Because I will tell you, Easton, I feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes I made, waiting till I felt like I was, quote, unquote, ready.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you're jumping on that already. And it is very similar to to running and selling. You have to, work your way through the learning curve the same with that as you do with selling. So, well, Easton, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing with our group. We have a growing group, some veteran agents, but a lot of new agents, and I know that all of them will find this information helpful, and I appreciate you sharing with us.
Well, yeah, Paige, thanks again for thinking of me and having me on. It's always a huge honor to be asked to do anything like this, especially being so new. So, yeah, thanks a bunch for thinking of me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, make it a great week.